Hello and welcome to this channel again. In this video, I'm going to share a tip on how you can fully automate your pivot table. So, what I mean by that is that whenever you'll be updating your data, your pivot will refresh automatically and you don't even have to change the range. It will automatically pick up any new data that you would be adding to your data set. So, let's not wait further and start away. So in this video, I have this data already prepared, which I'll use as an example. So normally what happens in a pivot table, whenever you create one, so say if you select this range and on the basis of this, you insert a pivot table, and for that you can also refer my video on pivot table, which I've mentioned in the description below. And you can then create a pivot and work with that. But what if I tell you that you can somehow automate that range? That means that you do not have to manually change the range going forward. Excel will automatically do that for you. For that, we will use a formula called offset. Although it is a range based formula which is mostly used in case of lookup formulas, but we will be preparing a separate video on that. But you can pick up the cue over here, and if you follow step by step, then you can also use a offset formula to automate your pivot table. So let's have a look how we can do that. So for that, first we need to name our range that the pivot table will pick up. So for that, what we need to do, you can go to the formulas ribbon and click the name manager. Now we will create a new range. So we'll click new and let's give it a name called my data. And over here where it's written refers to, we need to put our formula now. So how we will do that? First we'll type offset. So this is the formula we'll be using, bracket open. So the first parameter that we need to give is the reference. The reference for this would be cell A1 of data sheet, from where my data would be starting. So I'll mention this data exclamation mark, and we need to lock this cell as well so that it doesn't change. $A$1. Now we have mentioned the reference point from where the range needs to start. And one more thing, that I'm mentioning data over here, so that is the name of the sheet. So say if the sheet's name would have been database with a space, then it would have been something like this. So you start with a single quote, database, and then again close that quote and then an exclamation mark. But because we don't have that, so we can just go ahead and simply type in data. So the next field that we need to give is the row number and column number. I won't be defining any particular row number or column number because it can be infinite or a maximum number of ranges that is available in an Excel. So for row I'll give 0. The next is column. For that also I'll give 0. Now we need to give the height and width. So height means how many rows we need to pick and width means how many columns we need to pick. So because my data can be of n number of rows and n number of columns, so what we'll do, we'll use a count a formula which will count the number of non-blank rows and non-blank columns. So that will become my range. So I'll type in count a, bracket open. Now here again I'll give it a range, so it will be data exclamation mark, and this time I'll pick up the whole row. So dollar a, sorry, not row, it will be column, dollar a, and next we'll give it the columns. So that will be count a, again data exclamation mark. Now this also will be locking it, so it will be $1 underscore $1, close the bracket and close it, and then we'll click OK. So let's just see what has happened. So we are applying a formula. We are asking Excel that my range will start from cell A1, right? That is where my table is starting, you can see over here. Then I'm not specifying how many rows or columns would be there. I just have a slight idea. So the idea would be all the non-blank cells, right, toward in the rows and in the columns. So wherever you is finding rows that is not blank, you will consider that as part of the range. So that is what exactly these two formulas are doing, and we'll just click close. So once this is done, I've already specified my range. Now let's go to insert ribbon and we'll click pivot table. Now because I've already named my range, so I don't have to select the table again. So what I can do, I can just straight away type in my data. That was the name that I've given to the range. We'll create it in a new worksheet and click OK. So now you can see, because I had given that range, so this whole sheet you can say is the range for me now. So whatever is there, it has now picked it up. So you will see all my column headings have become fields. So I can just bring in these fields over here now. So sales team, say I'll bring it into rows. Year I'll bring it into columns. Employee name I'll bring it into rows, and sales achieved I'll bring it into values. This is the pivot table that has been created for me. Now how is this automated? So say if you go into data and you type in a new set or data set. So I'll give an st1 2022 and say I type in a name called BVI and give it a sales figure of 200,000, and let's add in one more st2 2022 and I'll name it GFB and I'll give it 300,000. Now ideally what would have happened is that I would have clicked the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, then click change data source and selected those two rows and then refresh this. But now you don't have to do that. You can just straight away right click on the pivot table and refresh this. So you see now it has automatically picked up those two new rows. You don't have to change the range, you don't have to do anything. So again, let's do one more thing. st1 2022 and let's give it a name LKI and again 500,000. Again, I don't have to pick anything. Let's just right click over here and click refresh, and you can see that it has picked up that data. So now you have automated the pivot. You don't have to change the range. The other type of automation that now you can do with this pivot is that it automatically refreshes. So you don't have to right click and refresh. So for that, what I want is that whenever I update the data and come to this sheet, it will automatically refresh this for me and I don't have to do any thing manually over here. For this, I will introduce you to a concept called macros or VBA codes. Although it is a vast subject in itself, but I'll be only scratching the surface of that right now. With the help of just one single liner code, I can automate how that this pivot table will be refreshing on it itself. So let's see how that happens. So for that, first of all, let's rename this sheet. So we'll rename it to pivot, because that will help me identify the sheet when I'll be writing that piece of code. Now let's just right click over this sheet name pivot and see, you'll see a button called view code. So let's click this. Now this will open up a Visual Basic page where you can write a code. So let's double click on sheet 1 pivot that we can see over here, right? And we'll start the code by writing option explicit So what this does, that it will capture all the line items and it will run simultaneously. Now we need to write a code inside an event. So the event would be whenever someone will open that worksheet, this will activate and it will refresh the pivot table. So for that, the syntax would be private sub worksheet underscore activate. So this is the event that will happen. So whenever this worksheet will be activated, then whatever code has been written in this, it will run that. So we need to type in just one line of code for this. That will be worksheets. So I'm mentioning which worksheet. So that is the object that I'm using. So this will be the worksheet named pivot. That's why I named that sheet. Now I need to select what object from that worksheet we need to use. So that will be pivot table. Now I need to mention the name of the pivot table that we have used. So it will be, I believe it will be pivot table 1. So we can check that by clicking the pivot table. You can go to pivot table analyze, and here you'll see it's the name is given pivot table 1. So we'll again go back to my window. Over here we'll type in pivot table 1 within double quotes, bracket close, and the event that it will trigger will be refresh the table. Refresh table. If you just press an enter, so you have written the code. Now just one thing to remember, now that we have given a code, now this cannot be saved as a normal XLX file. This has to be saved as a macro driven file. So the whenever you'll save this file, then select macro driven file or a .xlsm. Do remember that. So now let's just close this window. Now let's see if we go to data, if this is working or not. We'll add a line again, st2, we'll give 2022. Let's put in a name and a figure, and let's put in another date. So this time st1, again 2022, tse, and this time 4. Now let's see if it is automatically refreshing that for me. So I'll go to pivot and see, now it has automatically refreshed this pivot table for me. I don't have to press any right click, I do not have to press any refresh button. Whenever you will be changing your data over here and going back to pivot table, it will refresh it. So say if I want to delete these two lines again, now again we'll go back to pivot and see those two has been deleted. So by doing this, you can fully automate your pivot table in a Excel sheet in your database, whatever way you are using this. Thank you for watching this video. Hope this will be very useful to you. I have also attached the link to the video on pivot tables. So if just in case if you want to check that, you can see. Thank you once again, and do subscribe to this channel.